So at elders meeting, I had a little chat with our pastor. And I said, Pastor Cole, I think you've given me an assignment that's not biblical. And he looked at me inquisitively and he says, what do you mean? And I said, I went to my exhausted concordance, King James, and I put in bridge. And do you know how many answers I found for bridge in the exhausted concordance? 0. There's not one time that bridge is talked about in the Bible. I said, how am I supposed to preach on a subject that's not even in the Bible? That doesn't seem quite right. But I sat and thought about what was the intent. What is the intent of a bridge? And the intent is obvious. It is to make a connection between ungodly men and God. And my lovely wife, she says,
Show me the ladder to me.
my wife says, that sounds like what people are. People are the bridge between ungodly men and the God of heaven. And I did more looking at it and more study. And when Jesus was on earth, he had an audience that just followed him. You know, we don't have that today. We can't just go downtown and start talking about things and have a throng of people follow to listen. But I found that Jesus uses one of the methods that he gave us, the right arm of our gospel, the health message. He would heal people to make the bridge from God to them. And I looked through the ages, and I thought of the Waldenses. The Waldenses lived in a time of religious persecution. People weren't just following them, they couldn't. And so they learned how to minister to people other ways to get the message out. They memorized scripture. They sewed it in clothes that they sold. You know, they printed it on pottery that they sold. They got the message out. And then my mind went to the 1800s and the 1840s. And when you look at that time in history, how ripe we were for the gospel. We lived at a time when our nation was truly Christian. We lived at a time when people were interested in the gospel. People studied the gospel. There was prayer meetings, there was Bible studies all over. People were very interested in the gospel. And I truly believe that Christ could have come shortly after that if everything had lined up just right. It was a wonderful time of history. And even early in my life, I remember us going into towns, dark counties, and we would find an empty lot and try to find out who owned that lot and see if we could borrow it or rent it to hold some evangelistic meetings. We'd pitch a tent or put up an oratorium, put a great big sign out in front with a few lovely looking beasts on it, and people would come to the meetings. And through the ages, I remember that turning into Revelation seminars. We would rent usually a hotel room, and it was very predictable. If we sent out 1,000 invitations, we would get 3 responses. 3% would come back. So if you had a motel or hotel room that would hold 100 people, you'd multiply that by 3,000 or divide it out, and know that you've got to send out about 30,000, or my math is probably all messed up here. Anyhow, we would use the formula of 3 people coming out of 1,000 to know how many invitations to send out to get the room full. And they signed up for that class. That evangelism even has kind of waned. We live now in a country that is mostly non-religious. We live in a country where the churches of different denominations have made their bridges in a different direction. Instead of bringing people to Christ, they have tended to go to the people. Look at the music that has come into our churches. Look at the churches that have dances. Look at the churches who have completely strayed from what God would want us to be closer, to bridge to the people, to get them to come. I think God has called us a different direction. And when I looked at this sermon and what we need to talk about, I thought, I could tell examples of another church family that's doing this. Or, better yet, I could invite them to come and share. And I have been blessed by being involved in this, and I've asked Richard and Janice Smith, my neighbors down the road a little ways, to come this day and share what they're doing in the big city of Curlew. And come on up. There's reasons that I like this, because Curlew is close. It's a small town, so we're not talking about someone in Spokane or Seattle or someplace big. It's a small little town, and I think we can identify with it. Here is your clicker, and I've got another mic for you.
Yay.
And I'll let you turn me off.
Good morning, church. I want to tell a couple of stories first. I came into the church in 1986 through a private revelation seminar that was being held in an elder's residence. I was searching for truth at the time, and so the truth was my greatest need. That's what I wanted to know, was the truth. In 1984, Ken Cox had a crusade in Reno, Nevada, and like I said, I came in 86, which was 2 years later. Ken Cox had a crusade, and 100 people were baptized. 100 people. 2 years later, I show up, and I come in through a Revelation seminar, and there were only 3 left in the church out of the 100. What happened to the 97? I got to thinking about that. And what was their need? It's something to preach to somebody, to give them a revelation seminar. This is all well and good. But what are their needs, How come they went out the back door? And was it they came in and sat next to somebody and saw the scowl on their face? The people who were there that, really didn't have it in their heart. And, there was no connection. This great evangelist, Ken Cox, had left. And now it's there. What's left for them is to sit in a pew and listen to, and even the pastor that was there during the time that was supposed to transition over he was gone. A new pastor had come, and we're trying to repair what had happened. For the 3 people that were left, the message was what they needed. The 97, apparently, something happened. And so we have to think about today, what do people need? If we're going to connect with them, what are the needs of the people? Isn't this how Jesus worked? First, he would see their need. We'll talk about that in a minute. In 1993, 7 years had gone by. I was now head elder of the Reno church. They had pushed me into this, and I thought a little too quickly, but still, I had thought, okay, I'm head elder. What does the head elder do? I had some ideas, and so I tried some things, and one of the things was we wanted to put an elder on duty in the foyer out front. So a big church, so when there's people, the congregation wants to talk to the pastor, at least a dozen people. The pastor's trying to get ready for his sermon. And so I decided that the elders would take turns, and they'd be stationed out in front of his office and try to deal with the questions and the issues that come up so that the pastor doesn't have to talk to everybody before. Well, on this one particular day, I was standing in front of the pastor's office door, and it was closed. I was watching who were coming into the front door, and here comes this really handsome couple, a young couple about 30 years old, very handsome but worldly. She had a miniskirt, and they weren't obviously coming to church. They were talking to the greeters, and the greeters were pointing at me. And I thought, uh-oh. So they started coming over to me, and I thought, okay, so see what this is going to be about. And they said, we were told that we need to talk to you about marriage counseling. And I thought, okay, so I have to deal with this. I'm the elder on duty, and I'm not going to send him into the pastor to get marriage counseling just before the service starts. And I says, okay, why don't I come over to your house and get some information from you, find out what's going on, and we'll go from there. Let's make an appointment for like Wednesday, at 6 o'clock. And so they agreed, and they left. They weren't going to stay for church. So as I was driving to the address that they had given me, an impression came into my mind, thinking about our Sabbath school study this morning. The Lord impresses you with things. And the Lord impressed me with Jesus wants to be their marriage counselor. I thought, okay, wow, that must be a Bible study then. And so when I knocked on the door and went in, they were both there, and so we started talking. I says, okay, tell me a little bit about what's going on. And they said, well, first of all, we're not married. Oh, you're living together, and you've had a child. And they said, we have tried all the professional marriage counselors in the Reno area, and with no success. They can't help us at all. We've decided to split up. And at the last minute, the thought came to them that, why don't we try a church? And so that's where they showed up at our door. And so here I am thinking, and I says, okay, what do I do now? And so I says, okay, this is what we're going to do. I says, if you promise, we're going to have a Bible study. If you promise to give 20 minutes a day faithfully to Bible study, to these lessons that I'm going to bring to you, if you promise to do that, and then another thing popped in my head, and I was surprised that I said this. I said, I promise you results. Wow. So we started Wednesday, 6 o'clock. my previous wife who died of cancer 10 years ago, she would drive me to the address and drop me off. And I says, okay, 1 hour, you come back, and that's all we're going to do. It's just 1 hour on Wednesdays. So I would listen, and I showed them the Bible studies, and I told them what they needed to do. I said, it's best to do it in the morning. Give him 20 minutes. Just 20. That's all I'm asking. Yeah, that's all he wants. And you can do it in the afternoon if you have to, but 20 minutes. You have to do this every day. And so we would meet day after day after day, week after week, I should say. And this went on for 1.5 years. I would meet with them. And they had issues, the two of them. They would argue a lot. And so you can imagine, it's a beautiful couple. She was absolutely beautiful. And she was an aerobics instructor, kept herself fit and healthy and quite attractive. And he was a handsome dude, firefighter, and here's this couple. And what would happen is sometime I would show up and they'd had a fight, and she was gone and he was there. And so I'd get to talk man to man with him, and he'd tell me things, and then I might come another week and she was there and he was gone. And she would tell me things like, when we go out to eat or something like that, he's always looking at the other women, and checking out all the girls, because he's still single. And so I'd have an opportunity one time, and I'm not a marriage counselor at all. I don't know anything about that. It's just that the Lord wanted to be their marriage counselor, and the only way to do that is through this study. And so I had a chance to talk to him. I says, Sandy was her name. I says, she's a very beautiful young lady, very fit, and she does aerobics instruction. She takes care of herself. And not only that, she's the mother of your child. I says, why are you looking around? You'll be hard pressed to find another one that's as pretty as her. And that was the extent of my marriage counseling for 1.5 years. But I told him that. And then a couple of weeks later, he was gone and she was there by herself. And I came in, I said hello, and she started out right away, ragging on him for a whole hour. I said hello, got in one word. For a whole hour she talked. And then Margie pulled up out front, and I could see the headlights through the window, and I said, oh, my ride is here. I guess I have to go. I've said 8 words this whole evening. And she started, and she says, I am so grateful you came. This has been so helpful. And I'm sitting there, what did I say, And I managed to say goodbye. Maybe 10 words is all I said that evening. And she was so grateful that I came. And I remember getting in the car with Margie and driving away. And and I was saying, well, it's been 1.5 years, and it looks like they're going to split. It doesn't, I can't see how this can go on much longer. But I'm still going to go next week. It looks like the end, but I'm still going to go. And so I show up the next week, and they're both there. They're sitting on the couch, and I come in and, through the greetings, and says, we have an announcement to make. And I was thinking, okay, this is it. 1.5 years. 1.5 years, I struggled, trying to help them, trying to encourage them to give Jesus a chance. And they said, our decision is that we want to get baptized and we want to get married. I was trying to get my voice back. And we had a pleasant conversation. And I remember walking into the pastor's office, These people want to get baptized and they want to get married. And he said, no. He says they get married first and then they get baptized. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. What I knew as an elder, struggling with that. They did that. They joined the church. They became good members. He became the Dorcas leader. She taught junior Sabbath, one of the junior classes of Sabbath school. She taught that. Strong members in the church. They still argue a little bit, but the Lord was their counselor. What am I getting at? We have to meet the people where they're at. If we're going to share the good news, if we're going to share the truth, yes, that's good. But they have needs. Things are going on in their life. Maybe we have to meet those first. Now, I want to start with a couple of passages here. What did Jesus do? When I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. And it came to pass when Jesus had made an end to commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities. Now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples, and he said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them. Do you get it? First it was their need. He dealt with that. Now they're listening. Now they're listening. Here's another passage here. I'm going to go over to John chapter 5, and I'm going to start in verse 2. I'm going to read down to 14. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in, as it was, he was made whole. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, he knew that he had been now a long time in that case. He said unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no one when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and he took up his bed, and he walked. On the same day was the Sabbath. And it goes on. What did Jesus do? Did he come and preach to him immediately? He knew what the man needed. The story goes on. But first, he dealt with what the need was. This is how he got his attention. This man, Jesus, must know something. He didn't know who it was, but he wanted to know, who is this man that can do this? Let me go over to chapter 9 of John. And Jesus passed by and saw a man which was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, and night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, And he anointed the eyes of the blind man, and he said unto him, Go and wash in the pool of Siloam, if I'm pronouncing it right, which is by interpretation sent. He went by his way, and therefore and washed and came seeing. And the neighbors therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is this not he that sat and begged? Jesus touched this man. He touched many, many people. First, where they were at, seeing this is the need. This is what's on their mind. That couple that needed marriage counseling. This was on their mind. They weren't ready for a Bible study. They needed help. And they found out where to get that help. It came from Jesus. I'm going to Acts chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Now Peter and John went together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. And a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms of them that entered into the temple, who, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked an alms. And Peter fastened his eyes upon him with John and said, Look on us. And he gave heed unto them, expecting to receive something from them. Then Peter said, Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have I give thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And he took him by the right hand and lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. And he leaping up stood and walked and entered into with them into the temple, walking and leaping and praising God. And all the people saw him walking and praising God. And they knew that it was he which had sat for alms at the beautiful gate of the temple. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at that which had happened unto him. Meeting the people where they're at. Janice and I, she's going to come up here in a second. Janice and I thought about these issues, and one of the things we thought of was, why don't we do a Christmas program? Janice came up with this idea, a Christmas party for our neighbors. You know, we can come to church and say, okay, we're going to do a Christmas party at church, and fine, you know, we do such things. But what about the neighbors, the ones that are right around us that we should get to know? And we didn't really know a lot of our neighbors. And so why not do a Christmas program? So, and I'm going to click this thing and it's going to start.
Yeah, do the right button.
The right button.
I think it should work. Can you help us? There we go.
Oh,
I don't know why it didn't. We'll try it.
okay. We decided let's do an invitation that we're going to give to our neighbors. And so this started it. Yeah, you're on.
Actually, this is not the first invitation, but
Okay, I'll go to the first one.
anyway,
Can we go to the next one? Okay.
yeah, that's the first one. But anyway, it was this idea that we need to start getting to know people. We had only been married a short time, and I knew no one. Well, I knew about 3 people in our neighborhood, and they weren't even right on our street. And I thought, wow, we need to test this neighborhood and see if we gave them an invitation, would they come out? Is this the kind of thing that only church people are going to come to, or are we going to be able to reach out to them? So I thought, well, let's start with just our neighbors. So I did a little poem about coming out of the woods and all of this sort of thing, and decided that we would do a program that included caroling and the Christmas story. Not caroling door to door, just going to a building and being able to sing together. Maybe they can't sing, but oh well, we're going to try. So we talked to our neighbor who lives in the place that used to be light bearers. And they had camp meetings there for many years. And there's a lot of buildings on that place, and it was a Christian couple who bought that property. And they had said when we had started our little home church, when COVID closed the church, we decided enough of us lived close by that we would just meet together anyway. Well, that was 3.5 years ago, and it just keeps on going. And but he had invited us to have our church in one of those little buildings. It was the one that the Sabbath school classes, I guess, were done during their camp meetings, were held in. And so I thought, well, we really don't want to go on to someone else's property who's not an Adventist and accept his offer. It was a grand offer, but we know what times we're living in. We don't know what people plan to do eventually. They don't even know what they're going to plan to do, depending on what side of this issue that's going to come down on us. So we decided that we would just meet in one of our homes. But I remembered that. I called them and I said, would we be able to use that little building that you offered to us at one time? And they said, sure. So I thought, well, let's get started by the couple of neighbors that I knew. I'll ask them if they'll have a part in our little program. So they did. They said, sure, we'll do that. And we had a wonderful Christmas program. It was just such a good time. And at the end of it, we had Christmas refreshments and things that would appeal to them. And when we got through with our head count, we had 19 people. And there were 5 of us that were Adventists. So we had 19 people show up. The next year we did it again, which was the next...
Could you back up one slide?
No.
Oh, no, backwards.
No, I think he has to go forward there. Anyway, that was the second one. So we dreamed up another poem. And when all the head count came in, we had 36 people from the neighborhood. And 7 Adventists were there. So, well, we had more at that time because some came from the Republic Church, just a couple. We do not advertise in the church. We do not put it in the church bulletin because we're trying to reach the public. It's not that the church is not welcome to come. It's that the outreach is for the town of Curlew, Danville and Malo. We live in Malo. And so there were some things that I read in Desire of Ages, just trying to, many prayers were offered. Is this really what you want us to do, Lord? Are we doing what you want us to do? And then I came up with this in Desire of Ages, page 822, down toward the bottom. It says, let us do faithfully the work that is nearest. There are heathen at our very doors. Let our efforts be extended as far as God's hand may lead the way. The work of many may appear to be restricted by circumstances, so we don't have to go off to be a missionary somewhere in a foreign field. They're all around us. But do we want to open our eyes and see that? So the purpose of the Christmas program was to see if the Lord was moving us and could we get a little bigger. And so that's when we decided, we went to it wasn't an event, but it was a thing that was advertised to the Kettle Falls Church, so we went to it. And I asked the lady that put on the event, we can go to the next one now. Go to the next slide. And
Next one. That one.
that one. And this was, she does a greenhouse gardening class where you have no heat in your greenhouse and you garden all winter. And it was a fascinating class. And I thought, wow, you know what? Maybe that could be an event that we could just kind of check out the town a little bit like we did with our Christmas invitation. So we came up with a flyer. And this time we just went to the up and down the streets, and we took these invitations everywhere that we could think to go, and then we also hung them on every bulletin board between Malo, Curlew, and Danville. And when that event opened up, we had 47 people, there were still only 7 Adventists that were putting this on. At the back, we have refreshments that's halfway through. It's a 3-hour class. Halfway through, we have refreshments, and we have refreshments that some people would say, what are you doing that for? And then we have other refreshments that are, I'm glad you're doing that. And so, we don't do coffee, we don't do tea, we don't do any of those kind of things. But it is a nice little vegan refreshment that we do in between. And the people at the end of that were so excited about it, they just stayed, and we're having to pay by the hour for this building. And we had gone to the Civic Hall to see if we could use that building, and it's not real expensive, it's $25 an hour, but that they just kept talking. So finally, and I came up with this from Welfare Ministry, page 198 and 9. By instruction in practical lines, we can often help the poor most effectively. As a rule, those who have not been trained to work do not have habits of industry, perseverance, economy, and self-denial. They do not know how to manage. Often through lack of carefulness and the right judgment, there is wasted that which would maintain their families in decent. Go ahead.
Oh, well, this particular one was, what are you going to do when the power goes out? And we know that day is coming. And Moses Schrock, they are Amish. We're Amish. They've become Adventists, but they've continued to live the Amish lifestyle. And what does that mean? No power. They just live in a house, and they have a wood cook stove. He's very interested in helping us who are dependent upon power and comfort. He came and presented a topic that, what are you going to do? And showed us a lot of things. It's very interesting. And people were excited about that. Let's go to the next slide. Do you want to talk about that one?
Well, this one was an herbal class, and in our society, in our circle of people that live up there, they're all very much into herbs and they're new age, they're very much into natural everything. And that particular event was also filled to the brim with people, and they're all enjoying the refreshments that they're getting. Everything is vegan, and they just keep saying, wow, we need some, give us that recipe. So there'll just be different things on the table, as well as there are little pamphlets and little flyers. And we can go to the next slide. My brother-in-law is a doctor, and we did a wound and suturing class, and we were just full again with people. That's the only one that we did charge, because we had to pay for those suturing, for fake skin for them to to sew on. So everybody got to sew if they wanted to sew, and otherwise it was still very interesting for those who chose to just listen. So we can go to the next one. This one was just an interim thing that came in, and I would suggest that if you're going in the direction of reaching the people with their needs, because ours is not an evangelistic slant, that will happen after we've spent some time with the people. And so this got an opportunity came for Jim Burr to come, and when intermission came, we kind of lost half of the people. So you have to kind of pay attention to what his presentation was marvelous, but it wasn't what the people needed at that point. And so you have to kind of watch when you're doing this, how quickly you're moving in. We do a survey, I think it's up here, but we'll get to it. We can go to the next slide. We did another herbal class, and this one was just wonderful. A man came from Idaho, and he had some of the greatest things to say. The people were so excited about it. However, I will say, because we did do that interim, almost an evangelistic meeting, it turned a bunch of people off, and instead of having in the 40s, we had just barely over 30 people come. So we're just hoping to see that this next event maybe will pick back up and see what we can have. Now, the next one, I think this is the one that we're doing tomorrow. And my husband will be doing his gasifier machine that he took to Craig Meisner's program in Spokane.
A gasifier, what we plan to do is to modify a small pickup truck to run on wood, just straight wood. And so the theory is going to be tomorrow's class. And after the theory part, we will schedule in the springtime when we'll start getting into the nitty-gritty of what's it going to take to do this. And to do it in the backyard and not pay somebody for some expensive equipment. So how can we do this? When the time comes and the gas stations are charging $20 a gallon or there's no fuel at all, what are you going to do? You're going to get a horse? Huh? Yeah, yeah. And then after that, it's a double feature tomorrow. Then we're going to do?
Well, there are ladies that are going to be doing a bread class, teaching how to do Dutch oven bread, because you can do that on a wood stove. And the whole thing is to try to tie the two themes together with the wood idea, so that when you don't have electricity, you can still bake a loaf of bread. And this is what we're trying to do in our outreach to the neighborhood. Now, we do have a survey. That might be next.
No, the next one is...
Oh, this is a letter. Let's go to the next one, and then we'll come back to that. We give out a survey at every one of our programs. They get the survey over and over and over again. Every time they come, they get another survey. And then they mark on here what things they're interested in our doing a presentation over. And down at the very bottom, we have biblical fellowship. That is where we have an opportunity, and we've had people mark that one. Then we thought, how are we going to actually implement this biblical fellowship? Because we're reaching the rest of the crowd through our events. Every time we do an event, we pray, Lord, please bring the true seekers so that we can find your people. So the biblical fellowship is beginning to be marked. And so we just sent another thing, you'll see that on there are names and addresses, emails, and all of that. We didn't know if people would be that interested in letting us know who they are and where they live and all that information. We have 58 people that have given us their addresses and emails because they love the events. They want to come to every single one. And it's been a blessing to us. We'll hope that this one brings our crowd back together. And we decided that we have them In the third class, let me back up. In the third class, we decided we better name our events. And we call ourselves Country Life Crier. Anytime anybody sees that hanging on the bulletin board, they know that Country Life Crier are the ones doing the program. And we have heard nothing but positive reports from the people from town. We love those people's stuff that they're doing. The pastor of the church there, he said, so many in my congregation love what you guys are doing. And so we just praise the Lord that something is moving in that little area. It's a little dark town. There's not an Adventist church in there. There's a couple of Adventists that live there. And then we live in Malo. But anyway, we did come up with a website, and we came up with an email address. Country Life Crier wasn't taken by anybody. Praise the Lord for that. And so people can now email us, and we send all of these now out except for about 14 that we send by mail that don't have email. But all of these, just one little click of the button, we make our little flyers ourselves, and we click the button, and off they go, and everyone knows that we're having a program. Then those others in P.O. boxes, we mail those out. So do you want to say something? Oh.
When you're done.
This next, the one that we just flipped past, that is the little message that we decided that we would send to everyone. Even though just a number of people signed up for the Bible Fellowship, we thought, how are we going to let them know that we're ready to start whenever they are? And so this little note just got sent out a couple of days ago this week. So we've not gotten any response yet, but tomorrow is our double feature. And by doing 2 events in one, that so far is our 8th event for the year. And so it's just been a joy. And we know these people now. When we walk down the street, we didn't know anybody before. And so it's just been a whole lot of fun. And they see us and they say, oh, wow, those are just the best things to go to. We have to go to Spokane to go to stuff like this. So it's just, the Lord is good. He's given us a ministry.
You can do this too. I hear you have a hall that you can rent. You can do this too. Meet the people. Find out where they're at. Help them. We're trying to help people who want to be independent, who recognize that something's coming, and maybe they need to prepare. You know, we've been given the mandate. Ellen White has told us that we need to think about medical missionary work as the last work that we're doing. What is medical missionary for somebody like us, lay people? It's this kind of stuff, helping people with issues. The herb classes, people are very interested in those. They want to know how to do these things. And so, in a sense, we're doing medical missionary work in our own neighborhood. Yes, we have we have 2 doctors in our group. And they can do presentations of different things, you know, but Ellen White keeps counseling with us. You need to get away from having to go to the doctor. Go into your own pantry where there's things that you can share. So the counsel, I think, is meet the people where they're at. Go there first. That's your first thing. Then after that, when they get to know you and they trust you, they're not going to trust you when you come out Bible thumping. They're probably going to turn the other way. But when you come out with things like this, and they get to know you, that you're really a good guy, a friend, you're helpful, you're ready to do anything. You know, we're asking them, what do you want to do for the next program? And they have ideas. They're looking to us for help, so think about it. You can do these things here. You can make up, I make up these flyers. I do it in PowerPoint, and yeah, it's a hassle, but I'm learning and getting better each time. make up the flyers, and maybe you can't make up the flyers, but you can go hand them out. You print up a couple dozen of them and you go down the street and you just give them to people. And they say, what's this? Every once in a while somebody won't take it, but it's something innocent and interesting. Meet the people, find their needs, and be helpful. Yes?
I just wanted to say here too, as far as the event that we had that kind of turned into an evangelistic event, that is good. However, that's one that you would need to do when you have your biblical fellowship, and you can say, we've got someone that we're going to put up on the screen, and probably the biblical fellowship will be a home thing, at least to begin with, I can imagine. And we can put things like that up on the screen because their mind is ready for that. But when it comes to the general public, the world has changed so much. If things aren't fast-paced enough because of computers, you lose them. And so there's a place for each kind of outreach.
I don't have anything else to share with you this morning. Steve?
Thank you very much for coming. I am thankful for the days of Noah that we've already had. We've got Immunity coming up in December. January is still open, but in February we have Dr. Newman coming for the 16th and 17th. He's the one that did the skin and the sutures. He's going to be a little bit different here. And then the following month, I'm communicating with Jim Brackett right now to come in and do a cooking school with us. And we'll do that also in the dining room of the Culture Center. So still got January open, and I'm hoping that we can do this every month. And Lorelei, thank you for getting us started on this.